And of course, though recent studies in behavioral psychology show that most of the humans consider themselves rational but are irrational beings with capability for reason. So it's more complex than what it appears at the surface. And in one way or the other, we are all also very acquainted with not only the benefits of science but also that of applied science. Like we pretty much believe in science sometimes because our iPhones work the way we want, and our air conditioning systems and so on, which we take for granted, also work so seamlessly until there is a God forbid hurricane or something that happens somewhere. So all of this pretty much make us take for uh, what we take for granted is because we have the utility from science as opposed to more or less questioning what are the limits of the scientific method at its very core. So I don't know how many of you are like students of direct science versus technology, but at the very core of the of science in general is the scientific method, which works by making observations about some phenomenon of interest and hypothesizing what could be a plausible explanation to explain it. For example, if the sky is appearing blue, then you ask the question and you say that maybe it's due to some Rayleigh scattering and things like that. So you have some frame of reference to construct hypotheses, and then you conduct experiments to gather data and test whether or not those hypotheses are correct. So science involves primarily three types of reasoning, namely abductive reasoning to form hypotheses, and deductive reasoning to form predictions given the hypothesis, and inductive reasoning to generalize whatever conclusions we come to from a given experiment. So these three are the major types of reasoning, and that establish whether a particular explanation is scientific or not. But often many fail to recognize that there are also limits to science. And if somebody considers science as the only way to knowing the truth, that is an ideology in itself called scientism. And therefore, it's important that we understand that science is a very capable tool and should be used in its jurisdiction or domain. As opposed to using, for example, science cannot answer questions on the existence of morality or whether a green color or a white color or a blue color or a red color is suitable for painting the wall and so on, aesthetics. So there are different fields of interest that are beyond the jurisdiction of science. And at the same time, science is such a capable tool that it helps us, experience our modern day comforts, and pretty much everything we use in our lives are more or less products of science or engineering or some kind of rational knowledge system. So in today's session, we'll begin with observations, just like any students of rationality or science would do, and then we'll see where it leads us. So basically, we'll be looking at what are our observations and what are the observations that some glorified scientists have made, and $2 million questions, we'll see what that is. And for most of you who have an Indian context in mind, that's more or less like kaun banega crorepati. So then there is some activities and what are the take home points that we can actually get from this presentation. And of course, I'm using the slides by Radheshyam Prabhu, and these are so beautifully made. The first theme is we are going to look at what can we actually observe with our own senses. So different aspects of the universe, like there is a beautiful sunshine, or today is cloudy, there is not much sunshine, but conspicuous by its absence. And now there is a lot of grains that are growing that we subsist on, and then there is rainfall, there is so much of natural beauty. None of this we actually created, but we experience them, we benefit from them, and we need them for our existence, more or less. And we see there is this beautiful artistry, there is a lot of intelligence around, natural intelligence, and there is always uh, so many products of creation, right from the trees to the cosmos. And there is beautiful design. We'll also be visiting as to how things as simple as flower petals have a very systematic design that's built into it. We'll see some of it. And there is also the huge source of energy, the sun and several stars in our galaxy, and also from the point of view of laws requiring a lawmaker. So behind all of these different areas of observation that we can make, there is always an underlying cause behind it. So that cause is what is indicated on the right side. And okay. So when you see these paintings, obviously we know for a fact that there must be somebody who put these patterns together. For an AI, it would just appear as pixels to begin with, and then from different forms of abstraction, it will grow to conclude that this looks like a human face, and this looks like mountains, this look like waterfall, and this look like flowers. Now we know that behind these well-formed and well-established shapes, there must be a cause. That's a very simple, childlike reasoning. So behind this, we also have the natural equivalents, and there would be causes behind all of these as well. So who is the one who is designing this kind of an art? Just like, if we have artificial imitations of roses or paintings or any of these types of art that we have, there is a creator or there is an artist behind. Similarly, it's a simple observation that whatever exists in nature in its artistic sense will also have some cause behind it. So just like artistry implies an artist, so does beautiful organization of different entities. And we'll begin with honeybees and also look at spiders. So what's the specialty? We'll just see. Oh, the audio is not audible here. Maybe I should.
You have to connect your audio to this.
No, it is on the HDMI.
Okay.
Social insects because they.
Can you hear this on Zoom or no?
Yeah, they'll
be able to hear.
because they're near.
Work together
Okay.
as a community. Thousands of female bees, called worker bees, live together in a hive with a queen bee. The queen bee was marked with a red dot, so we can see her better. The worker bees are all females, but they almost never lay eggs. Worker bees do almost all the chores in the hive. They gather pollen or nectar, guard the entrance, clean the hive, build the comb, make honey, tend the queen, and feed the larvae. They even fan the hive with their wings to keep it cool on a hot summer day.
Okay. So obviously they do lots of things just like any other living being. No surprises there. But all of this actually requires some structure and some intelligence to function. And the very fact that there is an organization implies that there is an organizer. So somebody who is behind the scenes and who is impelling these different creations to take place. Just like even if you are an autopilot, with apparently no driver, you know there must be some intelligence that's powering it, the way it works, and that is a product of the cause who is the designer. So similarly, every organization requires somebody who is underpinning uh, that construct to begin with. So the organizer. If you look at some entities like spiders, you will be actually astonished to see that the webs that they produce are not only intricately aesthetic but also much larger than their own sizes. Has anybody noted that? The spider is so small, but it can construct webs that are really large. So we'll see some of it here.
Harry Potter.
Mathematician spiders. Compared to their own sizes, spiders build very large webs. Indeed, if we enlarged a spider to the size of a human being, the length of the web it weaves would be approximately 150 meters, which corresponds to a 50-story skyscraper. Is it possible for a human being to weave a lacework the size of a 50-story skyscraper in only an hour? But a tiny spider accomplishes much more than that. Moreover, the spider-woven web is the sturdiest material in the world. How do spiders weave these webs possessing miraculous features? The spider takes into consideration many factors while weaving a web hundreds of times larger than its own size. This task demands at least some calculations essential in constructing a building. For the accomplishment of this work, first the spider must draw a project like an architect, for a construction of this size, design, and sturdiness cannot be accomplished without an architectural project. Once the project is drawn, the spider must calculate the lifting capacity of each part of the web like an engineer, otherwise the web cannot remain suspended. In order to design such a web and make such delicate calculations, the spider must be more qualified than a college graduate. Indeed, there is not a university that provides education to the offspring. Following their birth, they begin to produce silk, weave web.
Okay. So, assuming that the spiders didn't go to Spider University or Harry Potter University, so we know that they possess enormous intelligence. And one of the things that's not there in the video is you would see spiders never get caught in their own webs, but others do. I mean, the other insects and so on. So they have this amazing intelligence and capability that is underpinned by some cause, and whether modern science explains it as a product of evolution or there is an intelligence that underpinning it, they are true that it's a product of some grand design. Whether even if we take an explanation of evolution, the way it has evolved, the very trail is also quite well engineered, and so that way we see that underpinning all this intelligence must be a person who has organized this, or an entity that has organized this. Similarly, these are very more or less simple trivial things. If there is a car somebody has manufactured, this must be a very old computer somebody must have assembled, even the modern ones. So, and watches, whether it be iWatches or something else, somebody has designed it. And even the wonders of the world are actually also architected by somebody, whether it be nature, whether it be humans. And same with different types of buildings, sculptures. So all of these products that we see in this world have some underlying cause that is imprinted in them, more or less like how we have our DNA, right? We are products of that in a sense, materially speaking. So similarly, the whole of the creation and behind that underlies a creator. And when it comes to different types of blueprints, seeds are the most common for plants. And some of you may be knowing that the huge sequoia tree is a product of small seeds, and these trees are so huge that it's counted among one of the largest in the world. And some of this, if to put it in the context of meters, so it's pretty much like um, 12 or 14 people lined up. Okay, that's meters. So 6 people, of 6 feet is 36, right? And then 95 feet is almost 12 of them, or 14, 16 of them. So 16 people lined up would form the diameter of the trunk, and that's actually quite huge. And all of this is packed into such a tiny seed. And just like if you know how a human is born as well, such a tiny, like bubble like structure becomes who we are all, right? So the microcosm holds the key to the macrocosm that we see, in a sense. And so obviously all these products of creation, whether it be natural or artificial, has a cause that is underpinning it. And the processors that we use, whether it be designed by Intel, Nvidia, AMD, whoever you like, and they are the artificial equivalents of a human brain. And you will be amazed at the way a human brain can function with such minimal power. It uses hardly 20 to 30 watts of power, and that is barely enough to power a bulb. And we have these huge data centers that are power hungry, and all this number crunching, the behind the scenes AI is more or less power bottleneck, like most of you know by now. So now we'll see this amazing human brain, some of the facts related to So we have this amazing low power, highly efficient computer in all of our heads, right? So we all have that. And it's not only that it works at low power, but 75% of it is just water. So it has such efficient thermals, amazing communication system that even rivals the number of stars in the galaxy by the sheer amount of connections that the neurons possess. And we can actually store the amount of information more than all the books in the entire world put together. So that's just amazing amount of memory. So we are not memory bottlenecked, thankfully. So that way, obviously, I mean, this amount of complexity that has arose must have a mechanism and a cause behind it. Just like when we design processors, there are just so many intricate layers that it's almost like magic, putting everything together and causing it to work seamlessly, even if there are bugs later. So now, if we get down to the micro world, those that we cannot observe, how many of you would like 1 kg of diamond? Everybody would like. But how many of you would like 1 kg of graphite? Maybe not so many, because it's hardly, I think, 0.01 cents you get it for 1 gram, you get it for 0.01 cents. whereas with diamonds it's thousands of dollars, right? And what's the difference between graphite and carbon? I'm sorry, graphite and the diamond? It's just molecular structure. It's essentially carbon, and it's just the molecular structure. There is a small change, and the entire appearance and everything changes through, pretty much like how there is phenotype and genotype in biology. Some things that you see is a product of what you don't see. So that's the phenotype, which is expressed as the external things that we actually see. And anyway, so we'll see it in due course here. So just like there is this small DNA that can cause this huge diversity in how all of us look, how all of us think, how all of us perceive, how all of us process. So all of this is in a sense more or less encoded in the form of the DNA, which is of course there is more subtle layers to it, but at the level that we can observe with microscopes, this is how it's all encoded. And how many of you have taken inorganic chemistry during your studies? Most of you might have studied it. So some of you have not liked it, but you would have seen all these different lattice structures that are resembling different types of cuboids and all these fancy structures. But it's not just abstract. The beauty is you find it in nature, just like you have graphite, and a slight molecular change makes it a diamond. Nobody seems to want graphite, but everybody wants to have diamond. So it's just that small structural change makes it invaluable pretty much. And of course these days maybe gold beats it, but so now when we look at even at a cosmic level or beyond the earth, there are so many parameters that we have to monitor for a satellite to function. I don't know how many of you have been students of aerospace or aeronautical engineering, but my bachelor's was in aerospace. So I know that it's quite complex, that when you have systems that have to be, you can't afford failures pretty much. You need to have mission critical systems, and there are so many things to monitor. These are just a sample of it, the orientation in the sky, the spin, the velocity, and all these things. So they are just a few categories of parameters that are listed, but this is what it actually looks like. There is a control room, maybe now most of it replaced by computers, or maybe not, but there are so many things that are going on, and for the whole project to be successful, then you have to make sure each and every small thing is fail safe. And so similarly, we have a lot of natural satellites as well as planets that are present, and it's just amazing that all of this seem to more or less seamlessly move around the sky. There is gravity, and there is this kind of a more or less naturalistic design to it, that even if a little bit of parameters would have changed in the sky, life as we know today wouldn't exist. This is known as the fine tuning of the universe. And just like there is this magnetosphere around the earth that provides it immunity from the harmful solar radiation, and the harmful particles are filtered out at the very outer layer. And the exact way the earth is positioned, for example, if it was a little bit away, or it could have become very like everything would have changed, and it could have become very cold and uninhabitable. And if it were more close, then it would have been very hard to survive the permanent summers. And so there is a more or less the fine tuning of not just AI models, but the fine tuning of the entire universe that lets life be the way it is today. And if you see, this is not only for Earth but also the whole solar system as such. Of course, whether you like NASA or SpaceX, but there is somebody or some force that is seamlessly putting everything into this orbital motion, that planets don't collide with each other. And of course, there is shielding of the asteroids and stuff. And so, more or less, it functions as a very seamless model that we have at hand or in sight. Now, not only this, we'll see that there are fingerprints or at every level of abstraction of a grand design that had gone into designing pretty much lots of things. This is a particularly fascinating video for those who like mathematics. And
Around 1200 AD, a man named Leonard Pisano, better known as Fibonacci, discovered a sequence of numbers that created a very interesting pattern. The sequence begins with the numbers 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and continues indefinitely. Each number is obtained by adding the last two digits together. A rectangle with the length and width of any two of the numbers of this sequence forms what is known as the golden rectangle, a perfect rectangle. A golden rectangle can be broken down into squares the size of the next Fibonacci numbers down and below. If we were to take a perfect or golden rectangle, break it down into smaller squares based on Fibonacci's sequence, and divide each with an arc, the patterns begin to take shape. We begin to see Fibonacci's spiral. The spiral in and of itself is insignificant. Its importance is revealed in where we find it. Take, for example, the sunflower. The display of its florets are in perfect spirals of 55, 34, and 21. The sequence of Fibonacci. The fruitlets of the pineapple create the same spiral based on the sequence. The pine cone does the same. As currents move through the ocean and the tide rolls onto the shore, the waves that bring in the tide curve into a spiral that can be mathematically diagrammed onto a plot at the points 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and 55. Buds on trees, sand dollars, starfish, petals on flowers, and especially the nautilus shell are formed with this exact same blueprint. With each segment of growth, the nautilus adds to itself one more value on Fibonacci's scale. This blueprint can be seen around us on a small scale every day, but the greatest example of all is directly above our heads. At an average of 100,000 light years across, even the spiral of the galaxies above us are formed with the exact design that the tiny shell is formed. This sequence or blueprint appears to be the trademark of a designer, a proof of a creator, something left behind indicating the one who was there, a fingerprint. As we scan our universe from the tiny flower to the awe-inspiring galaxy, we see the fingerprint of God.
yeah, so this is an amazing video where we see this particularly abstract mathematical construct. Those who are fans of number theory here, and Fibonacci sequence, how the number theoretic notion of it was mapped to the geometric notion of it using the rectangle, and then the Fibonacci spiral, which got mapped into different, or it's the other way around, which got abstracted from different entities in this universe, right from small things like flowers that we see, the conch shells at a seashore, and the galaxy that we are a part of. And it's quite fascinating that this kind of a pattern exists all throughout, and yet only those who are really with keen observations and keen intelligence seem to find it for us. And we are thankful that we are able to see these kind of patterns, and which also indicates that there is somebody who created it. So if you for example, give a child clean paper and some crayons, you will not find so nice patterns drawn without proper training. So when there are patterns that are so unambiguous to ignore, they show that there is some kind of a signature that is underlying what we see. So this is also usually dubbed as the signature or the fingerprint of God. But this is just to illustrate that there is something more than what meets the eye, which is that every design that we see, every pattern that we have, always has someone or some cause that has designed it. So that's the design to designer correspondence. And next we will be looking at the energy that is present all over the solar system. And it's interesting that 99.8% of this entire solar system is the sun by mass. And not only that, we'll see some stats on how much energy is emitted by the sun at every second relative to what we end up using throughout our lifetimes across civilizations. And when Elon Musk talks about Kardashev scales, it's about how advanced a civilization is with respect to how much energy is being utilized. For example, the scale 1 is when you are able to tap into the energy of the planet, and scale 2 is when you're able to tap into the energy of the star, and at the level 3 is when you're able to tap into the energy of the entire galaxy. But if you see, it's just amazing that okay. So there are a lot of amazing facts about the sun, including that it's just it's pretty much the reason for life that we have on the planet. If there were no sun, it would just be a cold desert, and if there were more sun, we would have burnt. So it's just the right amount of sun that we need. And so this is the stat I was talking about. The energy emitted by sun per second is larger than the energy consumed by the entire human race throughout history. So that's just a lot of energy. And for those who are bottlenecked with data center power consumption, this is a hopeful sign that we have a lot more energy we can tap into. But this also means that when there is a source of energy, there must be a cause that is underlying the entire mechanism in place. You can say that there is nuclear activity that's going on, and the sun is able to produce energy, but somebody must have designed that mechanism in such a way that it can go on for a long time. So don't worry, that's not the TV. This TV didn't get broken. So this is just to show that when you have some momentum, when you have some energy that's input into a stone and that hits its object, and so naturally you wouldn't assume that it just happened by chance. So you would ask the question that who threw the stone? Why don't you ask where did the stone fall from, right? Because we think that somebody must have thrown it. And even behind the apple falling, there is gravity that was discovered, not invented. So the mechanism in place is a product of a grand design that's there all over, and it takes a keen observation or a you know, uh, keen mind to unravel it for us. So yeah, so who is supplying energy to the sun? Of course, the nuclear fission scientists would say. Or and if that's the mechanism, then somebody must have put that mechanism in place. So therefore, behind the energy is an energetic um, entity. Let's just call it entity for now. And when we look at the world around us, there are different laws or different rules, let's say, because law has a broader connotation to it. So those who are college going, you have classes that are at scheduled times, and somebody would have put that in place, the rule maker. And there are different laws, driving, for example, in different countries would entail us to follow different laws, and somebody must have made them, obviously. The DMV, maybe not, but so similarly, whichever games, like the those who are following cricket would know that there is some World Cup going on, and somebody must have made the rules for the World Cup to take place, the ICC. And those of you who are fans of chemistry would know that the periodic table is a systematic arrangement of chemicals that are found in nature, or elements that are found in nature. And this arrangement is a discovery, right? And it's a law. It's not by chance that they happen to be there. It took a scientist of a keen observation to put that up in the first place. And even the laws of physics. So behind pretty much everything that we see, right from an apple falling on Newton's head versus all the way to people playing soccer at World Cups, there are equations governing all this motion, right? And Newton's laws, or if you take it a different level of abstraction, the theory of relativity. And so there are all these laws that are waiting to be discovered by those who are enthusiastic to look and find, also known as the scientists. So, but these are discoveries and observations that scientists make. They don't create those very laws that exist in nature. Somebody must have created for you to discover it, after all. So that's what the designer does, or the creator, for example. So everything you actually, even if you just want to study how a plant grows, there is a lot to study. And any phenomenon you take in this universe, if you study for sufficiently long time with sufficient scrutiny, you will come up with some abstract principles that you can contribute in that particular field of knowledge. And these principles are nothing but the laws and rules that are governing those existing bodies. And that's what is present in every field of knowledge, whether physics, chemistry, biology, any field of knowledge. And right from optics, thermodynamics, whatever you want to pick as your subject of study in this world is all governed by rules and laws that we would undiscover through the process of experimentation or rationality in general. And those have been put into the place already. So just like there are laws that govern this world, any field of interest, any object of interest, any phenomenon of interest, when you study, you inevitably come up with some rules that are governing it. So which means this whole world and this whole existence is filled with so many rules and laws that are present, which are products of some lawmaker or somebody must have designed it. Now then we ask the question, in the natural world there are so much of variation, and this also applies to humans. Not all of us look the same, though we are all humans. So if you see, for example, you may call whomever you like as beautiful or ugly or whatever, but we all have notions of these ideas of who looks like what and what that means to us in terms of objectively understanding whether, like they are one versus the other category in our heads. So we all have our compasses, and we all have some notions of these concepts, beauty, ugly, handsome, poor, rich, and so on. So all of this diversity that we see in this entire world must also be some product of loss. So to assume that it just happened by chance would be unscientific. So because that would be a grand assumption to whatever laws we discover in any field of study we undertake. So naturally, every diversity that we experience in our lives, right from our appearances to our thought processes, these are also governed by some laws. And now we'll see that some things are a product of existing laws, and at the same time we can use these laws to come up with something amazing, right? For example, we chose what we want to study. We are maybe choosing our careers, maybe not, but at least there is some this one. And same thing with spouses, or any relationships we are in. So at least we think we chose, or so. And then like cars and so on, apartments or whatever, anyway. So the point here is, all the diverse choices that exist in our lives, some of them are given to us and some of them are choices for us. Like for example, we don't end up choosing who our parents are, what's the shape of our faces. No matter how much surgery people try, we can't change the basic structure. You can't like change your bone structure, for example. And so some things are pretty much existing, and we work with them to our advantage than trying to change. Similarly, there are both of these types that exist, that what we can choose and what has chosen us. For example, all of the circumstances we are born into, we are the choice that are made by nature to be in that particular way. So, and who chooses those things that we don't choose by ourselves, right? And on what basis? So we just saw previously that there are well-defined laws that go into governing any mechanism or any phenomenon that we study in this world. Similarly, there are also well-defined laws that create circumstances for us. So anybody knows what is Newton's third law? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So great. So now, interestingly, it's not only Newton's third law, but that's also the law of the world, known as karma. What goes around comes around. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. A simple thing to understand is, let's say if I bang this door, now two things happen. If I bang it strong enough, there may be some deformation in the door, and my hand would also hurt. So there is an action that was performed, and there is a reaction that shows up on both entities. So similarly, everything in this world has an action and a reaction underlying it. So some things we see, some things we don't. So when we plant a seed, maybe after several years or several months, depending on what plant it is, it fructifies. So there is an action. There are actually more actions. Maybe we are watering and there is sunlight and so on. And there is a reaction. There's a tree or a plant that comes up. So similarly, all the diversity that we see in this world that are not chosen by us, for example, unhealthy lifestyle choices of how food shapes one's being and all those things, maybe that's by choice, but there are a lot of things we don't choose, and those also have uh, an action that's preceding it. So that's the inference from whatever we have seen so far in this world, that every action has an opposite reaction. So similarly, of course, it may not be opposite, every action has a reaction to it. So if you put a mango seed, you can only expect a mango plant, not an apple. So similarly, depending on what actions were performed previously, one receives reactions accordingly. So this is known as the law of karma. So this is a quote from one of the spiritual texts, which basically says that depending on what karmas were performed, a particular living being enters into the womb of the mother and through the father when there is conception that happens, and then ends up in that particular family, ends up with those particular bringing up, ends up with those particular face cuts and so on. So all those are products of what karma the person had performed in the past that leads to the present. Just like me banging my hand against the door, has a consequence to it. So every action has a consequence, and that's what is law of karma. So the very fact that there exist laws both at a physical level as well as a subtle level shows that there is a lawmaker behind these scenes. And such a lawmaker, you can call it, you can call that entity as God or a supreme being that exists somewhere, or the invisible hand behind nature. When we say nature, sometimes we may not notice whose nature are we talking about. We all have our natures, do we not? Some of us, are all the time cheerful. Some of us are all the time skeptical. Some of us are all the time, uh, like angry or whatever. So all of us have different personalities, which are our natures. So when we talk about the nature that we see around us, the nature is whose nature? That's the question that's being asked. It's the nature of God. It's God's material nature. So that's the inference that's coming up from here. And of course, modern science would not admit a supernatural entity. Oh, I think I lost the Zoom connection here. So I'll wait for it to load. But in the meantime,
You can
okay.
reconnect it.
Yeah.
Thing
So,
in progress.
okay. So sorry, I got disconnected from the Zoom, but let me just reshare the screen again. Okay. So what we were discussing is that when we talk about nature, science likes to admit only
Minimize that. Yeah.
science like to admit only natural explanations, because at the very core of science, as we discussed in the scientific method, there is a part which only admits falsifiable hypotheses. Falsifiable means testable. So you should be able to test a hypothesis. For example, if I said in my, 20,000 years from now, I'll be some other being. There's no way to test it out. Oops, I think I again lost Zoom. What's going on? So there is no way to test it out. And at the same time, not only falsifiable hypotheses constitute truth, there are also non-falsifiable explanations which constitute truth. For example, if I say this universe continues to exist after...
Recording in progress.
Okay. Sorry about that again. I don't know what is happening. My Zoom got disconnected again. So what we were discussing is that when we talk about nature, science only allows natural explanations because it requires falsifiability. So you want your explanation to be testable. So if I say 20,000 years from now, I'll be a dinosaur, there is no way to test it. So therefore, it's not a scientific hypothesis, or I cannot use it as a basis to form a scientific theory. But at the same time, falsifiability is not the only criteria for truth. And this is very important to realize, because if I made a statement that the universe continues to exist after my existence, after my death, then that is not falsifiable for me. There is no experiment I can do to actually show anybody, including me, that the universe would continue to exist after my existence, right? Or after the end of my existence. And yet, we continue to hold it as a truth for us. Therefore, falsifiability is not the only criterion, and which means science is not the only way to know the truth. So there is some limitation, and therefore, given this paradigm in which science operates, known as the scientific method, science only admits natural explanations and not a supernatural cause. Because even if you put a supernatural cause, you would have to explain the mechanisms by which it happens, and those mechanisms are what are unraveled by science. So if it's too much of theory or philosophy, just let it go. But the point here is, there is it's a very rational inference to know that when there are so many laws and patterns and rules and signatures that we find in this world, that there has been a governing mechanism that all of those exist, and that governing mechanism people call it nature, but whose nature? It can be God's material nature, and that's perfectly rational to accept. And that is not going to make anybody um, non-rational. Whereas if a scientist says that it has come by chance, that would be unscientific, because it's not the jurisdiction of science to decide what's beyond nature, because science only studies nature and only studies natural explanations. Therefore, it's important to understand, when we have tools at our disposal, including science, we should also understand the scope of it. Without understanding the scope of it, if we take the scientific method to be the only way to examine truth, that leads us to an ideology called scientism. And therefore, it's important that we acknowledge the limitations of the tools that we have. And it's not an absolute tool. If we made science absolute, then we are admitting science is God, because that's what it would mean. So therefore, it's an ideology to just consider that nature exists by itself, there is no cause, and we'll see why it is an ideology, because it requires faith without any reasonable explanation that science would like. So before we see that point, we will just quickly enter into some of the observations that notable scientists have made. So maybe one of you can read what each of the scientists is saying. So anybody wants to read what Albert Einstein said? Yes, please.
The Lord God is subtle, but malicious he is not.
Yeah. So when we talk about the quotes from scientists, we should understand that they have decades of experience investigating different scientific fields as well as philosophies. And these are coming from their immense and profound realizations. So, of course, you will find scientists of both categories, but here we are going to see that attributing a God or a supreme entity from which everything else sprung is not unscientific, and therefore there are scientists who are Nobel laureates, who are of glorious standing, who believe in the existence of God as well. Otherwise, if it were unscientific, those leading scientists would not be, considering it a part of their scientific belief, in a sense. So, somebody wants to read what Schrodinger mentioned?
The top is occluded. Can you read
Oh,
it?
okay. Yeah, so let me read it. I'm very astonished that the scientific picture of the real world around me is very deficient. It gives us a lot of factual information, puts all our experience in a magnificently consistent order, but it is ghastly silent about all and sundry that is real, near to our heart, that really matters to us. It cannot tell us a word about red and blue, bitter and sweet, physical pain and physical delight. It knows nothing of beauty and ugly, good or bad, God and eternity. Science sometimes pretends to answer questions in these domains, but the answers are very often so silly that we are not inclined to take them seriously. So, this, of course, coming from a scientist who would presumably understand the scientific method and the scope of science. So, this is Kelvin's quote. Anybody wants to read? Maybe someone else want to read?
If you think strongly enough, you will be forced by science to believe in God. Lord Kelvin.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you. So, this is if you lend the investigation to extreme scrutiny, you will actually discover the limits of science as well, and you will also see why it is not unscientific to believe in God. It's just beyond science whether somebody believes in God or not. It's part of philosophy and not science as such. And therefore, Schrodinger mentioned that you cannot apply science to some of the areas of inquiry that are beyond science. Like, knowing what is red and blue, it's actually perception. So if you Google something called the dress, which became an internet sensation, so somebody saw that a dress a woman was wearing was one color, half of the world saw it one color, half of the world saw it in another color. Now, this actually shows the subjectivity of perception that is ignored when we just study things by removing the observer from it. We just want to study the observations without considering the observer. So the observer also comes with their own subjectivity, and that's how we perceive this entire world. So therefore, it's important to note that there are some areas of science which do not address this subjectivity in observers, which is what makes perception meaningful to us. And it's important to know the limits of science, just like it's important to know the limits of any tools that we use. And this is a story of Isaac Newton, and he had a model of the universe in his room as he was studying, and one of his friends came up to him and then he said, oh, this is such a beautiful model, where did it come from? So he was just joking to his friend saying that, oh, this just appeared by chance. And he said, no, I mean, you must be, yeah. So, and then obviously he said that, this was created. So similarly, the model is created. What about the real? The painting is created. What about the real person? Must be created as well. And therefore, it was Newton's view, what we have here. Can you actually see it from? Oh no. So let me just read this. This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. This being governs all things, not as the soul of the world, but as the Lord over all. And on account of his dominion, he is to be called Lord God, the universal ruler, Isaac Newton. So we see that most of these scientists were also philosophers who had ideas about what is nature and the fingerprint behind nature. They all saw it their own way, but the point that is being conveyed from this is that it is not unscientific to believe in the creator or a god. It's just beyond the scope of science. It's just your belief is as good as mine at some level, if you want to just argue scientifically. And if we look at what Max Born is saying, maybe this somebody can read because the entire quote is visible. Who wants to read? Please.
I saw it in the atom, the key to the deepest secret of nature, and it revealed to me the greatness of the creation and the creator. Max Born.
Yeah, thank you. So, atomic theories, Max Born is a famous scientist in that area, and he looked into the atom and he looked out of it to see the greatness of the intricate patterns and of creation and the creator behind it. This could be a philosophical god for all we know, but it does not matter as long as there is an acknowledgement that what we see is a product of an entity that we do not see, and such an idea is not unscientific. And this is a very famous mathematician, most of us would be knowing. He was extremely famous for his intuition, and the proofs, the theorems that he gave are still being proved to this very date. And he said that the insights that he got when he wrote those were coming from a deity of his family. And let's see what he says. Somebody wants to read? Yes, please.
An equation for me has no meaning unless it represents a thought of God.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now, this equation takes the form of patterns, and that's what we saw in the Fibonacci spiral as well. And that's how we can relate the abstract patterns that are found in the real world are equations or signatures of the mind of the creator. And that's what Ramanujan is saying here. Heisenberg, the uncertainty principle, a lot of us would be knowing. So what he said is there is a higher power not influenced by our wishes, which finally decides and judges. So of course there is no uncertainty about this statement, he made it. So now this is how we actually see that those scientists of great standing had a very refined philosophical view about what exists beyond science and the jurisdiction of philosophy. So we ought to value the privilege of knowing God's truth far beyond anything we can have in this world. That's from Faraday. And So these are some of the renowned scientists who had world views of belief in God. And then based on all of this, we'll go to Kaun Banega Karorpati, or, or just let's make it gender equivalent there. So, so for those who may not be acquainted, which I'm sure are none, this is not $1 million question alone. It's a $10 million question, because 1 crore is 10 million. So let's see what the question is. What is the origin of the universe? Big Bang, Big Bang, intelligent design, chance. So obviously, by what we have seen. Okay, so someone's saying Big Bang and someone is saying intelligent design. And interestingly, we'll see both. So intelligent design, for all that we know, based on the patterns and the laws and the rules that we have seen so far. But there is also a Big Bang theory, so we'll also look into it. But then what's the purpose? So eat, sleep, and be merry, make money and pass away. No purpose, to understand God and life. Okay, that sounds like in line with what the session would be. So, so to understand God and life. Okay, so you got the questions, answered correctly. So we have to ask Amitabh Bachchan to give the $10 million. So now we'll see here that anything that exists is not only created, but also created for some purpose. So whether it came by chance and has no purpose, or there is a purpose behind it. So any machinery that we see, any chips that are designed, any of the gadgets that we use, are all meant for something. There is an intention that has gone into that creation. Whereas if we look at, for example, so similarly, the much more complex creation that we are a part of also would have a purpose behind it. So now if we looked at the Big Bang theory, can somebody, maybe this is not readable, so let me read. So the Big Bang theory says that everything began from a point of infinite temperature, infinite density, infinitesimal size, that is physically indescribable, mathematically unverifiable, beyond all conceptions of space and time. Now, for a person who is not researching in this area, as all of us, it may appear like very, it's like a fable, right? If I showed you and told you that God was a unicorn, then you would think it's a fable and cause smile to your faces. Similarly, if I tell you that there is a point of infinite temperature, which I don't see, infinite density that I have never come across, infinitesimal size, maybe atoms, but still they have some size, that is physically indescribable, mathematically unverifiable, beyond all conceptions of space and time. This is exactly what faith sounds like. So we put immense faith at the very core axiom of the most famous explanation of the origin of the universe. And unfortunately, we don't even know, most of the time. So we just assume that it must be true because science has told it is true. So it should be emphasized that no theory of the origin of the solar system has yet won general acceptance. All involve highly improbable assumptions. So we just don't know is a very safe answer than saying that it all came from something indescribable, which is also okay, but at least don't call it scientific when you call it the other side as just a product of blind faith, because it's equally blind to me. So we have mechanisms, but there is no way for us to actually test out what happened millions of years ago. And there is no way for us to create dinosaurs in labs from bacteria. So at most there is some evolution that, microevolution, we can maybe transform species a little bit here and there. But unless there is testable, falsifiable evidence, there is no way we can actually claim that everything evolved from nothing, pretty much, so to speak. So that's, your guess is as good as mine. So now that we saw all these, I think we are also hitting the time boundary here, so I'll be quick. So just like there is governance, there is a governance in this country or in any country, and then there is also universal governance. And when it falls out of balance, then there are consequences to that as well. So just like at least those who are aware of Indian bureaucratic or political or governance structures would know there is a home ministry which takes care of law and order punishment. Accordingly, there is also a universal home ministry, so to speak. Depending on what kind of activities one engages in, there is consequence. It may be more bluntly put here, but we all know that actions come with consequences, and anything that reckless a person performs, there's always a consequence to it. And related to health, there are so many herbs, and if you are familiar with any of the stories, so there was some discussion long ago between different sages, and they were trying to find one plant which has no medicinal value, and they couldn't find any, because each plant in this creation has some unique medicinal value to it, and that's what forms the basis of the science known as Ayurveda. So same thing with energy. We have massive power systems. Well, we have naturally massive power systems in the form of the sun, and there is a finance ministry, and similarly there are like the valuable precious gems that are occurring in this creation. And there is defense ministry. We just saw the magnetosphere, the ozone layer, the immunity in our body. So there are equivalents. And then just like for education, there are different books. Similarly, there are different kinds of spiritual texts, and which are understood to be a product of people who have much more refined perception that we do. And on that note, what are some of these texts actually? For example, when we talk of the Vedas, which I can speak for, is that they are not a product of unrefined senses. For example, if you and me look at the world, we will only see, for example, the range of the spectrum. We don't see ultraviolet, infrared, and so on. Similarly, we can only hear 20 to 20,000 hertz. And those of you who have dogs, they can hear better than you. So that's the scientific fact, because they hear ranges much beyond our 20 to 20 kilohertz range. And similarly, we know that all these different abilities that are there in us are limited, and when these are limited, we cannot assume that we can know the absolute truth with limited senses. Therefore, spirituality, in especially the Vedic path, has different ways by which we can purify our senses, so that we can look at the world as it is, meaning without the bounds that our senses are limited to. And this is the practice that was followed by different spiritualists, call them yogis, or different realized beings, who purified their senses and then observed the universe. And in the sky, they could actually see revelations of the different universal truths, which were put together in the form of what we know today as the Vedas. So therefore, Vedas are said to have no human origin, because the humans who could perceive them were already at a superhuman ability. They broke free of the limited perception that a person is used to in general through the process of yoga. And once they are at that level, they could see the cosmic, call it vibration, the cosmic sound vibration, and the patterns that are underlying the universe, and they gave that in the form of the encodings we have as Vedas. So that's a small note I wanted to make, that it's also perception, but it is purified perception. So it's not a limited perception. And so behind all these different governing machines, there is a personal entity. So like, behind the government, there is a body of beings who are like human beings. Similarly, there must be a personal entity behind this apparently impersonal nature or universe that we observe. And so that's mention about what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, which is quite related in this context. He says, Mata parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya mai sarvamidam protam sutre manigana. He says that everything in this creation that appears the way it is strung by the invisible thread of me, Krishna says. So those of you who like necklaces and garlands, would you like if the thread is very visible? No, we want it to be nicely bedecked and nice, aesthetic sense to it. So similarly, in this world, we do not see God with our own senses, but we see that invisible governing mechanism behind all the phenomenon that exist. So that is the beautiful underpinning of the necklace of design that we can observe in this world. So that's what Krishna is saying, that he is that underpinning mechanism. It represents him. And by knowing this, we should have some take home message, right? Otherwise, it just becomes theory. So the take home message from this is that, oops, does it show up here?
Yes,
Oh yeah, okay. So we need to use our intelligence. Many of us think that coming to spirituality means turning off our brains. Absolutely not. So coming to spirituality means investing our brains in appreciating the artwork and the creation of the creator. And by doing that, you can be a great scientist as well. And it is not unscientific to actually believe in God, as we saw from some of the notable scientists of our not generation, but of our century. So that's what. So we can actually unfold the mysteries of God's creation through science as one of the mechanisms, but there are other mechanisms of investigation as well. And all of this point to the glory of the Creator, the underpinning thread that holds everything in place, the invisible lawmaker that's responsible for all the rules and the laws that we infer through observations in this world. So, to understand and explain the purpose of this creation, which is to love God and all. Of course, this may sound a little bit abstract, but what is the purpose of creation? We did not touch upon that, but we know from one of the points that we visited that whatever we are today is governed by whatever we were yesterday. So, in a sense, so this is the law of karma. So, whatever actions we undertook in the past has a bearing to what we are today. And that's why what goes around comes around. That means the action has a consequence to it. And if this is the case, how does karma work? Karma is a fairness mechanism in this world. You may want the same thing that I want, but who decides who gets? Who decides who is more deserving of it? So that is dependent on the karmas that we make, right? That's why some of us are sitting in this room and not at a homeless shelter, for example. So it may be the hard truth, but we all need to be accountable for how we are, how we have been, and how we will be. And that mechanism of accountability is called the law of karma. And given this mechanism to promote fairness, we understand this is the grand picture for the purpose of our birth, and we try to become better beings. And that way, in the process, we create better karmas and we promote ourselves to the next levels in the universe. And there's a whole universal mechanism, maybe in some of the other sessions we'll talk about. But by understanding this law of karma, we become better beings individually and collectively, and that makes our society a better society to live in. And that's the purpose of this creation, to promote those universal values which are underpinned actually out of love to God and to one and all. That's why those ideals are expressed in the very first place. And that's what we are all looking for. Now, we may be thinking we are looking for maybe subscribers, followers, or we may be looking for admiration and respect, but it's all the calling. We are looking for love, really. That's what we are looking for in these various forms. And when we understand these principles behind the creation, it is there to reciprocate that love between us and God, and which means to utilize everything for the pleasure of God and everybody's welfare. So therefore, when we eat, for example, we offer it to God through the mechanism that is given in the scriptures, and then we take that as prasadam. So we are all eating the same food still, and because our consciousness is different, it helps us be different beings, because we are all products of our consciousness as well. We think, we speak accordingly, and we act accordingly. So our consciousness is what decides where we are going. So on that note, I want to thank you all for your patient audience, and hopefully I didn't confuse you more. Thank you. So if there are any questions, comments, disagreements, please.
Nikhil.
Oh, please.
So, Prabhu, I have two questions actually.
Yes.
The first one is around all the scientists who you put up who had the quotes. I think the latest one might have been 1970s, 1980s.
Mm.
So it seemed like they had a lot of realizations through introspection or retrospection after their discoveries of scientific principles. Why is it that it might be wrong, might be incorrect on my part, but why is it my observation that modern scientists either don't speak about that, any introspections of based on their discoveries that might lead to people believing in God, or maybe they speak against God anyway? So do you have any opinion on, and maybe I'm just wrong in my observations, why do modern scientists not have any quotes like that?
We don't have quotes, but there are modern scientists as well who are same split like the prior scientists. Some of them believe in God, some of them don't believe in God. But the reasons for them to believe in God or disbelieve in God is not science alone. It also is from how they view science, how they view the world, and how they are shaped up as well. Some may be born into like families of certain upbringing that also shapes their faith. Some may be investigating with the tool of science, and they may not believe that it applies to spiritual pursuit. So there is no necessary correlation between holding scientific views and whether or not you believe in God. So what I wanted to point out is it's not unscientific to believe in God, but that does not mean that all scientists would believe in God. So it's an independent thing. It's a personal choice, and it is not to be judged by the scale of science. That's what I meant to say, because science in itself will work whether you are an atheistic scientist or a theistic scientist, as long as you follow the scientific method. So it has no bearing based on your beliefs, but your beliefs will shape what you become. So there are mix of modern scientists as well who may believe in God, who may not believe in God. Yeah.
I just want to add one point. You spoke about scientists. Maybe you can add one quote so we can put your quote as scientist.
No, I mean, of course, yeah. So, yeah, so modern scientists as well have both views on the existence of God. And um, it is scientific to state that the subject of God is beyond the scope of science. So,
I have another. Can go ahead.
Go ahead.
please.
So you were talking about, like, I'm an engineer by profession, but I do have like some curiosity in pure science, and you're like, you have a background of pure science. I hope like my comments are more like a critical comment on whatever commentary you did.
Please.
So you talked about fine tuning of the world that we live in, right? Anything is off balance just by here and there, and it'll basically be a hell to live in. But I was recently reading a principle called as anthropic cosmological principle, which is pretty basic. It states that just the fact that you're living is determined by the fact that it was conducive for you to live. So you wouldn't exist in a place which is not conducive for you to live in the first place. So like you will only observe your environment to be suitable for you. So that is one argument against fine-tuning argument that book makes. So I wanted your comment on it.
It's actually good because you believe that you exist.
Sure. Like as a material body.
So we believe that we exist, and we believe that we exist because it's suitable for us to exist. What I was saying is that suitability exists in the first place because if something went wrong, we would not live, and that very design is conducive because we are meant to live in the first place. So if there is no universe, if there are no people, there would be no discussion about anything. And because there is the universe and because we exist, then we are thinking about the signatures that are in the universe. We are making observations, and all these things are products of our observation. So it is perfectly fine to hold the view that we exist only because the conditions are right, because that's what it is. And because we exist and the conditions are right and we are meant to exist, therefore the conditions were meant to be right.
But you can only exist in right conditions.
Yes, that's why we are
That's
talking.
that's a principle. Like you cannot exist in wrong conditions.
Yes.
So you can only observe right conditions.
Yes, but the very fact the conditions exist and are right also means that we are meant to exist. And if we are meant to exist, what is the meaning of our existence and all those things is what we were discussing about. So I'm not against the belief that we exist because it's suitable for us to exist.
Okay. We'll take one more and
Please.
then we can take offline discussions. We'll
Please.
take one more last.
So science totally failed in describing what's the start of everything. But what do our scriptures have to say about the start of things? Or is time itself an illusion for us? There was no start and there's no end.
Yeah, so all good questions here. So one of the common criticisms of intelligent design is that if this world is so complex and there is a complex design to it, that means somebody must have designed the complex designer who designed the world. Though how do you explain the existence of God? And the answer to that is similar to what Big Bang theory also gives of what happened before the Big Bang. So to that, the mainstream view is that time was also created. So when you don't know what to make sense of when there was no state, when time didn't exist. So our scriptures, for example, say that beyond the sphere of material creation, time exists eternally, meaning it is, or you can say material time doesn't exist at all. So in a sense, time is a created element as well in the material realm, which is more or less an irreversible force that you cannot like back and forth of time. So this is what the scriptures state. But the quality of time wise, there is time dilation in different planetary systems. The velocity of time is different. So for example, what a person observes, and some of you may be acquainted with what is Brahma Loka, the Loka of the secondary creator. So there, one moment is 6 months here. So the concept of relativity of time is also present. And of course, it's not worded as such, but we can infer from the statements that are mentioned that time itself is a creation, a material time, and what exists beyond time in the sphere of eternity is difficult for our minds to wrap ourselves around that concept. So it's similar to what Big Bang theory sees as says about what existed before the Big Bang or why the Big Bang happened in the first place. Okay, fine. The Big Bang happened, and then there was a organic evolution of all the life that we know as it exists, or the creation as it exists. But why it happened? It's like somebody is playing pool, and you are seeing that the balls are moving, but you don't see the person's intention of what is happening and why the shots are being played the way there is. So there is a strategy to it, and that is what the idea of intelligent design notes, that there is an intelligence that's powering all the design that we see in this world. That intelligence itself is eternal, beyond the scope of time. And anyway, because you asked about the scriptures, the word for eternal is sanatana. So, and therefore it exists in the realm that is beyond the material creation, which is subject to time. The material creation comes into being and like gets out of being, meaning it always gets transformed. Just like, the human, was at like a bubble at some point, and after the person's death, it's like just a bunch of ashes. So from bubble to ashes, and then the creation again happens in cycles. And this happens in the material creation. And beyond that, in the spiritual state of existence, there is no notion of time, there is no influence of time there. So it exists eternally. It's like asking the question, when did the sun rays come into being given the existence of the sun? So of course, it's kind of inseparable there, because there is a continuum. So similarly, given that the spiritual dimension exists, we all are part of it, and we find ourselves in material bodies and so on, and there are karmas that act as a propellant to how we evolve. So there is a whole dynamic force that's underpinning this whole evolution that we see at different levels of abstraction. So I hope it answers what you are looking for. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.